Hello everybody, and welcome to Ancient Architects. Please subscribe now to get the latest ancient history news and independent research from around the world. The most famous site of pre-Pottery Neolithic Turkey is of course Göbekli Tepe, an enormous hilltop site situated to the east of Sanliurfa and made up of a number of spectacular enclosures, mainly circular or oval in shape and having dozens of decorated T-shaped pillars. But what actually is Göbekli Tepe? We know that media stories often call it the oldest temple in the world, and I know that people often scoff at such an idea, not just with regards to Göbekli Tepe, but to many ancient structures around the world, with responses like if archaeologists don't know what it is, it's always a tomb or a temple. But in actual fact, the archaeologists of Göbekli Tepe are more reserved in their classification of the site. It's the media that writes the soundbite, the oldest temple in the world, because it's hard to define exactly what the site is, and such a phrase does tell a story or a documentary. It makes people click a link or watch a video. So is temple the right word to use? When we think of a temple, our minds often go to Roman or ancient Greek examples, a place to worship the gods and goddesses of old, and there are often statues, writings and records, and various other clues that are left by ancient civilizations to correctly classify such structures as temples. Sadly, at Göbekli Tepe we are not that lucky. At pre-pottery Neolithic sites in Turkey, we can only look at material finds. There are no writings or records to help us make sense of the sites. We don't know who or what these people worshipped, or even if they worshipped at all. We don't know if they had gods or goddesses, and if they had spiritual and afterlife beliefs. We have to take an educated guess that's based on material evidence. That's really all we have. For example, at the pre-pottery Neolithic A site of Göbekli, a site that's older than Göbekli Tepe, burials were positioned under floors of circular enclosures, close to the walls in a fetal position. They were also buried with grave goods, and this may all imply that the ancient people did have an afterlife belief. But the thing is, we don't know with any degree of certainty, but based on the evidence it's a fair assumption. Many people look at Göbekli Tepe's decorated T-shaped pillars and offer an interpretation as to what they are depicting, and as you probably know, there are dozens of ideas out there already. Some say they portray ancient rituals, some say they symbolise seasonal changes, some say they are related to the early Neolithic society and lifestyle, some say they relate to the afterlife, and some say they're astronomical. But right now there really is no consensus. For a culture to have a temple structure or temple complex means the people of that culture had to have had a degree of spirituality. They would have had to have had a belief system. But with only material finds that are open to interpretation, we simply can't know for sure. All we can do is make educated guesses based on the archaeology. For example, Göbekli Tepe is a truly enormous site, but it's notably different to the known domestic settlements from the same era of time. For the size of Göbekli Tepe, there is a severe lack of material finds in a domestic context. A lack of domestic archaeology implies it is unlikely, yet not impossible, that this was a permanent settlement. So if people didn't live here, what was Göbekli Tepe? The other thing that differentiates Göbekli Tepe to the other pre-pottery Neolithic sites of Turkey is the level of art and decoration. The pillars are very well decorated, far more so than other circular enclosures that are found at known settlements from the same era. But does such decoration imply that Göbekli Tepe is some kind of religious temple complex? Again, this comes down to interpretation. The central T-shaped pillars of the enclosures are certainly anthropomorphic, with arms on their sides and hands coming together at the navel. Some of the clothing depicted implies importance, such as garments draped around the pillars' shoulders and fox pelt loincloths that hang from the highly decorated belts, as well as having collars or necklaces around their necks or a brooch. The central T-shaped pillars are also larger than life. They tower over any human. Are they symbolic of specific people? Are they the ancestors? Are these the ancient gods? Or are they merely decorated functional pillars that had a specific shape to support a roof over each respective enclosure? The T-pillars in the enclosure walls are dominated by animal reliefs, but again, the reason why is open to interpretation. Are they recording star constellations? Are they recording the seasonal changes? Are they simply showing the natural world around them? Are they telling a story? Are they depicting their own mythology or belief system? Or are they just decoration? Your guess is as good as mine. Recently, I was reading some Greek myths that include animals and humans in various fanciful stories. But without the ancient written record, there would be no way to truly understand them if all we had were a few decorated pillars. So if the pillars of Göbekli Tepe are portraying their own beliefs, myths and legends, we can only really guess what they were. So, back to the question, is Göbekli Tepe the world's oldest temple? Well, Göbekli Tepe is unique in the landscape. The quantity and quality of decorated pillars that make up the circular enclosures does differentiate it from other sites. Love and care clearly went into it, and because there is a lack of domestic finds, it does lead people to believe it had a special function. The fill of each enclosure has also been analysed in great detail, and we know they were not naturally filled in. But it was a careful and deliberate act, again implying that these enclosures did have a very special function for many hundreds of years. So maybe Göbekli Tepe was a place of worship, maybe it was a place of feasting where different settlements came together, maybe it was a place to welcome in a solstice or an equinox, maybe it was a place to hold public gatherings, to trade, share ideas and speak to the wider population, or maybe it was a centre of learning, like a primitive ancient Neolithic university. It could have been all of these things, but it could also have been none. It could just be a settlement, like an ancient capital of pre-Pottery Neolithic Turkey, and maybe the domestic aspect of the settlement is simply still buried below ground, because we know that only 10% of the site has been excavated. The archaeologists that work at the site don't use the world's oldest temple soundbite, as they understand the flaws in such a phrase, as well as the complexity of the site and the gaps in knowledge due to no written records. Archaeologists may well have their own personal opinions, don't we all? But they do all agree with some confidence that the circular enclosures of Göbekli Tepe were communal structures or special purpose buildings. That's really as far as they can go. It seems that every site in pre-Pottery Neolithic Turkey had a special purpose communal building. It's just that Göbekli Tepe has many, and the purpose of these special purpose buildings is what we don't know. I think each enclosure had a roof, and that, together with the fact they were sunken into the ground, also makes them ideal places for storing food, to keep it fresh and free from predators and pests. To the ancient people, this in itself could make them sacred enclosures. It's possible Göbekli Tepe was like the capital settlement, and these were food storage enclosures, and each settlement in the surrounding landscape had to fill one enclosure with food, and that food went to the ruling elite. And I guess it's even possible that each circular enclosure could have been the home of someone of high importance. The majority of Göbekli Tepe is still unexcavated, so at this stage all we can do is speculate. But yes, Göbekli Tepe could be the world's oldest temple complex, but all we know for sure is that it was the place with the largest accumulation of communal or special purpose buildings, and based on how we interpret that fact, based on how we interpret the function of these buildings and their associated iconography, is the only way we can classify Göbekli Tepe. And, as stated, so far there is no consensus and too much is open to interpretation. I'd love to know what you think Göbekli Tepe is, so please do comment below. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Ancient Architects. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel, please like the video, and please leave a comment below. Thank you very much.